My sister-in-law coached her friend to seduce my husband while I was 7 months pregnant. The text said, "Today's the day, he won't be able to resist anymore." When I showed him the messages, she said I'd trapped him with a baby. I stayed silent. That was a year ago. This morning, she sent a package to our daughter from prison. Why is my sister-in-law trying to hook up my husband with her best friend? My sister-in-law is my husband's half-sister, since she came from their mom cheating. His dad split from their mom when he was 12 after a DNA test showed she wasn't his kid. My father-in-law wouldn't deal with my sister-in-law but stayed close with my husband. So because of that, my sister-in-law is super needy with my husband. My husband is also very protective of his sister and generally doesn't tolerate anything negative being said about her, even though she can be very unhinged and erratic at times, even going as far as crying at our engagement party because she didn't get any gifts. Anyway, my husband and I bought a house last year, which has its own indoor swimming pool. My sister-in-law was super excited when she saw it and asked if she could use it sometimes with her friend. We said it was fine, as long as she gave us a notice before she turned up. Her and her friend Chloe have used it many times before, but almost never when my husband is home. With CVID resurfacing, my husband has started to work from home sometimes. My sister-in-law asked me if she and Chloe could come over and use the pool. I told her I was uncomfortable with them coming over as I'm pregnant, but my sister-in-law then asked if she and Chloe were isolated for 2 weeks, would they be able to come over, and my husband said it was fine. 2 weeks later, they turned up to my house. My husband was in his office, so they went straight to the pool after making small talk. My husband ended up coming out after an hour, and we're hanging out in the kitchen. My sister-in-law walks in to get a drink, and she starts talking to my husband. Before she goes back to the pool, she says, "Chloe's going to be so happy to see you." It was weird because my husband and Chloe aren't close. Chloe comes into the kitchen 2 minutes later, dripping wet with her towel not covering much, and spends the rest of her time talking to my husband until he excuses himself to get back to work. She's super giggly and smiley when she talks to him. He would say something sarcastic, and she would laugh like it was the funniest joke she's ever heard. It honestly felt like she was flirting with him. Before she went back to the pool, she gave me this weird smirky look. Before they leave, they ask my husband if he's working from home every day of the week. He confirms he is. The next 2 weeks, they come over to the house to swim every single day, except Chloe never gets in the water. Instead, she hangs around the house in her bikini every single day. Whenever my husband comes out to hang around me, she quickly interrupts him and keeps him talking until he has to go back to work. I made lunch for us all, and when I excused myself to call my husband down, my sister-in-law quickly stopped me and said Chloe could call him for me. They shared a look, and Chloe looked really happy when she went to get him. Chloe has also started to get touchier with my husband. She's put her hands on his chest and arms, stands or sits really close to him. To my husband's credit, he does usually create space between them whenever she does something like this. The reason I believe my sister-in-law is in on this is because she's made a few pregnancy-related jabs at me recently. She told me a story about how one of her friend's boyfriends was cheating on her, and then said something along the lines of, "Did you know a lot of men start cheating when their wives are pregnant?" She's also made comments about how I look chubby now, and it looks weird next to my husband because he's well built. If she spots my husband out of the office, she quickly goes to inform Chloe. I noticed it yesterday when Chloe actually followed my husband into his office. I was in the hallway when I saw her slip in behind him, closing the door softly. My heart started racing as I moved closer to the door. Through the thin walls, I heard her giggling again. That same fake, high-pitched sound she'd been making all week. My husband's voice was firm but polite, asking her to leave because he had a conference call. She didn't leave immediately. I heard her say something about how hard he works and how he deserves someone who appreciates him. The door opened abruptly, and my husband walked out, his jaw tight. Chloe followed, adjusting her bikini top and shooting me another one of those smirks as she passed. That evening after they left, I tried talking to my husband about it. He was sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through emails on his laptop. I placed my hand on my growing belly and took a deep breath. He looked up when I mentioned Chloe's behavior, his expression immediately defensive. He said I was reading too much into it, that Chloe was just friendly. When I pointed out the touching and the constant interruptions, he shrugged and said he'd been handling it by creating distance. He reminded me that Daniela had been through a lot with their dad rejecting her, and these pool visits meant a lot to her. The conversation ended with him returning to his emails while I stood there, feeling more alone than ever. The next morning, Daniela texted me asking if they could come earlier than usual. She said Chloe had a hair appointment later and really wanted to get some sun first. I was still in my pajamas, hadn't even had breakfast yet, but I said yes because saying no would just cause more drama. They arrived within 20 minutes. Daniela immediately commented on my appearance, noting how tired I looked and suggesting I should try some under-eye cream she'd been using. Chloe was already in her bikini, a red string number that left nothing to the imagination. My husband emerged from his office around 10 for coffee. Chloe practically sprinted from the pool area, water droplets glistening on her skin. She positioned herself between my husband and the coffee maker, reaching up to grab mugs from the top shelf, her body pressed against his for a moment before he stepped back. She handed him a mug with a wink, then asked if he could help her with her phone because it wasn't connecting to our Wi-Fi. He said he'd look at it later, but she persisted, touching his forearm and saying it would only take a second. Daniela appeared in the doorway, watching the interaction with an odd smile. I decided to make myself useful and started preparing snacks. As I sliced fruit, Daniela sat at the kitchen island and launched into another story about relationships. This time, it was about a coworker whose husband left her for a younger woman right after their baby was born. She emphasized how the new girlfriend was skinnier and more fun, how the ex-husband said he felt trapped by domesticity. Her eyes kept flicking to Chloe, who was still hovering near my husband, laughing at something on her phone that she insisted on showing him. The pattern continued for days. Chloe's bikinis got smaller, her touches lingered longer, and her interruptions became more strategic. She started bringing up inside jokes from previous visits, trying to establish a rapport with my husband that excluded me. One afternoon, she actually sat in his usual spot at the kitchen table, forcing him to sit next to her when he came out for lunch. She leaned into him while showing him something on her phone, her breast pressing against his arm. He immediately stood up and said he needed to get back to work. Daniela's comments grew crueler. She mentioned how pregnancy changes a woman's body permanently, how some men can't handle the transformation. She brought up statistics about divorce rates after children, always framing it as casual conversation. When I confronted her about it, she acted hurt and said she was just trying to prepare me for reality. She accused me of being hormonal and paranoid, said I was creating problems where none existed. I started documenting everything, every touch, every comment, every smirk. I took photos of Chloe in her various barely there bikinis, noted the times she followed my husband, recorded Daniela's hurtful remarks in my phone. My husband found me doing this one evening and asked what I was doing. When I explained, he sighed heavily and said I was being obsessive. He insisted Daniela would never intentionally hurt me, that I was misinterpreting innocent behavior because of pregnancy hormones. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I was 7.5 months pregnant, feeling huge and uncomfortable. Chloe arrived wearing what could barely be called a bikini, just triangles of fabric held together by strings. She didn't even pretend to swim anymore, just laid on a pool chair positioned perfectly so my husband would see her through his office window. Around noon, she went inside, ostensibly for water. I followed quietly and found her outside his office door, adjusting her top to show more cleavage. She knocked and entered without waiting for a response. I pressed my ear against the door. She was complimenting his work ethic again, saying how lucky any woman would be to have him. Her voice dropped lower, more intimate. I heard movement, then my husband's voice, sharp and clear, telling her to stop. The door flew open and he stormed out, his face flushed with anger. Chloe emerged behind him, her lipstick smudged, reaching for his arm. He jerked away and told her to leave his house immediately. Daniela rushed in from the pool area, demanding to know what happened. My husband explained that Chloe had tried to kiss him. Instead of being shocked or apologetic, Daniela turned on me. She accused me of poisoning my husband against them, of being jealous and controlling. She said I was threatened by younger, prettier women and was taking it out on poor Chloe. Chloe stood there with fake tears in her eyes, claiming my husband had misunderstood her intentions. My husband's face went cold. He told them both to leave and not come back. Daniela started crying, real tears this time, saying he was choosing his paranoid wife over his own sister. She brought up their father, how he'd abandoned her, and now my husband was doing the same thing. It was emotional manipulation at its finest, and for a moment, I saw my husband waver. Then Chloe made a mistake. She muttered something about how I didn't deserve him anyway, how I'd trapped him with a baby. The silence that followed was deafening. My husband's expression shifted from anger to realization. He looked at Daniela, really looked at her, and asked if this had been planned. Daniela's tears stopped abruptly. She lifted her chin defiantly and said she was just looking out for him, that he deserved better than a fat, paranoid wife who would only get worse after the baby came. She said Chloe understood him, would make him happy in ways I never could. My husband told them to get out. His voice was quiet but firm. Daniela tried more tears, more guilt about their father, but he wouldn't budge. As they gathered their things, Chloe's phone fell from her bag. It landed face up, the screen lighting up with messages. Before she could grab it, I saw my name in the text preview. My husband picked it up, and Chloe lunged for it, but he held it away and read the messages aloud. The texts revealed everything. Daniela had been coaching Chloe for weeks, telling her exactly when my husband would be available, what to wear, how to act. There were messages about waiting until I was too pregnant to fight back, about how men were most vulnerable when their wives were least attractive. The final message sent that morning said, "Today's the day. He won't be able to resist anymore." Chloe snatched her phone back and ran out. Daniela stood frozen, her scheme laid bare. My husband asked her why, his voice breaking slightly. She laughed bitterly and said we had everything: the house, the pool, the baby on the way, each other. She had nothing but a father who wouldn't acknowledge her, and a brother who only tolerated her out of guilt. She wanted to hurt me the way she'd been hurt, wanted to destroy something beautiful because she couldn't have it. My husband told her to leave and never contact us again. She screamed that he would regret it, that family was supposed to stick together. He replied that family doesn't try to destroy each other's marriages. As she stormed out, she yelled that when I got fat and boring after the baby, he'd wish he'd listened to her. The door slammed behind her, and suddenly the house was quiet. I sank into a kitchen chair, my hands shaking. The stress of the past weeks crashed over me in waves. My husband knelt beside me, apologizing over and over. He said he'd been blind, that his guilt about Daniela's situation had prevented him from seeing who she really was. He admitted he'd dismissed my concerns because it was easier than confronting the truth about his sister. We held each other in the kitchen while I cried, releasing weeks of tension and fear. That night, I started having contractions. The stress had triggered early labor. My husband drove me to the hospital, holding my hand and promising things would be different. As we waited for the doctor, he blocked Daniela's number on both our phones. He also called his father for the first time in months, finally understanding why he'd kept his distance from Daniela all these years. His father wasn't surprised by what had happened, said Daniela had always been manipulative, even as a child. The doctor assured us the contractions were just Braxton Hicks brought on by stress. She prescribed bed rest and told me to avoid any more emotional upheaval. My husband helped me into the car, his hand never leaving mine. During the drive home, he kept glancing at me, his face etched with concern and guilt. The house felt different when we returned, emptier but somehow safer without the constant threat of invasion. The next morning, my husband called in sick to work. He made me breakfast in bed and sat beside me, finally ready to talk about everything that had happened. He told me about growing up with the weight of Daniela's existence, how his mother would cry and beg him to be nice to his sister because she had no one else. He explained how his father's complete rejection of Daniela had made him feel responsible for her happiness, even when she crossed boundaries. He'd spent years making excuses for her behavior, convincing himself that her neediness and manipulation were just symptoms of abandonment. While we talked, his phone buzzed constantly. Daniela was calling from different numbers, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to vicious threats. She texted from apps we hadn't blocked yet, alternating between claiming she was Sewers Lidl and promising to ruin our lives. My husband showed me each message before deleting it, no longer hiding anything from me. One particularly nasty text said she'd already told their mother that I was abusing him, isolating him from his family. Another claimed she had photos of him and Chloe that she'd doctored to look compromising. His mother called that afternoon. My husband put her on speaker so I could hear. She was hysterical, accusing me of turning her son against his sister, of being jealous and controlling. She said Daniela had told her everything, how I'd banned her from our house, how I'd accused innocent Chloe of terrible things, how I was using the baby to trap my husband. My husband calmly told his mother the truth, including the text messages and the attempted kiss. His mother went quiet, then said Daniela was just confused, that we were overreacting. She suggested we all meet for dinner to work things out. My husband said no and hung up. The stress was affecting my pregnancy. I couldn't keep food down, and my blood pressure spiked. My husband took me back to the doctor, who put me on modified bed rest and warned that if things didn't improve, they might need to induce labor early. The baby was measuring small, likely due to my inability to eat properly. I felt like I was failing my child before she was even born, all because of Daniela's twisted games. My husband hired a security company to change all our locks and install cameras. He was taking no chances after Daniela's escalating threats. The security consultant mentioned that in cases like these, family members often escalated when cut off. He suggested we document everything and consider a restraining order. The thought of taking legal action against family made my husband uncomfortable, but he agreed to keep it as an option. 3 days after the confrontation, Chloe showed up at our door. My husband was in the shower, so I answered through the security chain. She looked different, no makeup, wearing regular clothes instead of a bikini. She asked if we could talk. Against my better judgment, I let her stand on the porch while I listened through the barely open door. She claimed Daniela had manipulated her too, promised her that my husband was unhappy and looking for a way out. She said Daniela had been feeding her information for months, showing her photos of my husband, telling her stories about how he complained about me. Chloe pulled out her phone and showed me more messages I hadn't seen. Daniela had created an elaborate fantasy where my husband was secretly in love with Chloe, but felt obligated to stay with me because of the baby. She told Chloe that I was emotionally abusive, that I controlled his finances, that he was miserable. The messages went back 6 months, long before the pool visit started. This had been planned since before I was even pregnant. Chloe claimed she felt terrible when she realized it was all lies, but I noticed she didn't apologize for trying to kiss my husband or for parading around half naked in my home. My husband came downstairs as Chloe was leaving. I told him everything she'd said. He was furious that she'd come to our house, but also disturbed by the timeline. 6 months of planning meant Daniela had been plotting while attending our family dinners, while pretending to be excited about the baby, while hugging me and calling me sister. The betrayal ran deeper than we'd realized. That night, unable to sleep, I went through our photo albums online. In picture after picture, I could see it now. Daniela's fake smiles, the way she positioned herself next to my husband, how she'd angle her body away from me. In our pregnancy announcement photo, she was looking at him, not the camera. At our housewarming party, she'd spent the entire time following him around. How had I been so blind? My husband found me crying over the laptop at 3 a.m. He closed it gently and helped me back to bed. He promised we'd get through this together, that Daniela would never hurt us again. But even as he held me, I could feel the tension in his body. He was grieving the sister he thought he had, the relationship he'd tried so hard to maintain despite all the red flags. The next week brought new challenges. Daniela started showing up at my husband's workplace. Security would turn her away, but she'd stand outside the building for hours, crying and making a scene. His coworkers started asking questions. His boss pulled him aside to ask if everything was okay at home. The professional reputation he'd worked so hard to build was being tarnished by association with her drama. Then came the social media campaign. Daniela created multiple fake accounts to comment on our photos, spreading lies about abuse and infidelity. She posted old photos of her and my husband with captions about how I destroyed their relationship. She even created a fake profile pretending to be me, posting horrible things about her and then screenshotting them as evidence of my cruelty. We reported each account, but new ones popped up faster than they could be removed. My husband's mother started calling relatives, spreading Daniela's version of events. His aunt called to lecture him about family loyalty. His cousin texted to say he was disappointed in how my husband was treating his sister. The family that had barely acknowledged Daniela's existence for years suddenly rallied around her, united in their condemnation of us. My husband spent hours on the phone explaining the truth, but Daniela had gotten her story out first, and people believed what they wanted to believe. The stress was taking its toll on our marriage. My husband became withdrawn, spending longer hours at work to avoid dealing with the situation. When he was home, he was constantly on his phone, either deleting messages from Daniela or arguing with family members. I felt like I was losing him to the very drama we'd tried to escape. One night, I found him in the nursery we'd started decorating, just standing there looking lost. He admitted he was scared that Daniela would never stop, scared that our daughter would grow up in this toxic environment, scared that he'd failed as a brother and would fail as a father. I was 8 months pregnant when Daniela escalated again. She started dating someone new and brought him to stalk us. They'd sit in a car outside our house just watching. When my husband confronted them, the boyfriend claimed he didn't know about any restraining order. We hadn't filed one yet, and that Daniela had told him I was holding her niece hostage. The police were called, but since they weren't technically on our property, there was little they could do beyond asking them to leave. My doctor was increasingly concerned about my health. The baby wasn't gaining weight properly, and my blood pressure remained dangerously high. She recommended inducing labor at 37 weeks if things didn't improve. The thought of bringing my daughter into this chaos terrified me. I started having panic attacks, unable to breathe when I thought about Daniela potentially trying to hurt our child to get back at us. My husband finally broke down and called his father. They hadn't spoken since the night at the hospital, but he needed guidance from someone who understood Daniela's capacity for destruction. His father listened quietly as my husband explained everything that had happened. When he finished, his father sighed and said he'd hoped Daniela would change as she got older, but some people were just born broken. He offered to help pay for a lawyer if we needed one, the first time he'd acknowledged any responsibility for the situation. The conversation with his father seemed to shift something in my husband. He came home with a determination I hadn't seen in weeks. He'd made an appointment with a family lawyer to discuss our options. He'd also arranged for us to stay with his father for a few days, just to get away from the house and the constant surveillance. Most importantly, he'd written Daniela a letter, not to send, but to process his own feelings. He read the letter to me that night. In it, he told Daniela about all the times he'd defended her, all the relationships he'd damaged to protect her feelings, all the guilt he'd carried for their father's rejection of her. He wrote about how he'd wanted to be the brother she needed, how he'd ignored every warning sign because he thought love meant accepting someone unconditionally. He explained how her actions had nearly cost him his marriage and potentially his child's health. The letter ended with him forgiving her, but acknowledging that forgiveness didn't mean allowing her back into our lives. We spent 3 days at his father's house. It was awkward at first. His father had never been warm, and the house felt like a museum. But slowly, they started talking. His father shared stories about Daniela's early years, the lies she'd told even as a child, the way she'd manipulated her mother into affairs by creating drama between her parents. He revealed that the affair that produced Daniela wasn't the first. It was just the first one that resulted in pregnancy. Daniela's biological father had wanted nothing to do with her, which his father suspected had broken something fundamental in her psyche. While we were away, Daniela broke into our house. The security cameras caught everything. She used a key we didn't know she had, probably copied during one of her pool visits. She went through our bedroom, our closets, the nursery. She took photos of everything, including personal documents. She spray painted baby killer on the nursery wall and left a doll with its head removed in the crib we'd just assembled. She was in the house for less than 10 minutes, but the violation felt enormous. The police finally took things seriously. Breaking and entering, vandalism, and the implied threat of the decapitated doll were enough for criminal charges. They arrested Daniela at her apartment, where they found evidence of her obsession, hundreds of photos of my husband, printed screenshots of our social media, and notebooks filled with plans to break us up. She'd been documenting our routines, noting when we were home, when we went to doctor's appointments, when we were vulnerable. My husband had to see the evidence as part of the legal proceedings. He came home shaken, unable to process that the sister he'd protected for so long had been capable of such calculated cruelty. The notebooks revealed that she'd been planning variations of this scheme for years, waiting for the right opportunity. Our pregnancy had been the trigger, the ultimate symbol of the family she felt she deserved but couldn't have. Daniela's arrest made things worse before they got better. Their mother went into overdrive, calling everyone she knew to garnish support for her daughter. She hired a lawyer who immediately started spinning the story. Daniela was having a mental health crisis. She'd been triggered by childhood trauma. She needed help, not punishment. The local news picked up the story, framing it as a family dispute gone wrong. Our names were kept out of it, but anyone who knew us could piece together the details. I went into labor 2 weeks early, the stress finally overwhelming my body's ability to protect the baby. It was a difficult delivery. The baby was small and my blood pressure spiked dangerously. For a terrifying few hours, the doctors weren't sure if both of us would make it. My husband later told me it was the worst night of his life, worse even than discovering Daniela's betrayal. He'd sat in the waiting room, praying to a god he didn't believe in, promising anything if we survived. We did survive. Our daughter was tiny but fierce, fighting her way into the world despite everything that had tried to prevent her arrival. When the nurse placed her on my chest, I felt a surge of protective instinct unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This little person depended on us completely, and I would do anything to keep her safe from the chaos that had marked her gestation. My husband cried when he held her for the first time. He whispered promises to her that she would always be loved, always be protected, never be manipulated or used as a pawn in someone else's games. He told her about the good parts of our family, the people who would cherish her without conditions or ulterior motives. He didn't mention Daniela, the aunt she would never know. We stayed in the hospital for 5 days while our daughter gained weight and my blood pressure stabilized. During that time, my husband dealt with the ongoing legal situation. Daniela's lawyer was pushing for a plea deal that included mandatory therapy instead of jail time. The prosecutor warned us that with her clean record and the family connection, she'd likely get probation at most. It felt like a slap in the face after everything she'd put us through. But my husband said he didn't care about punishment anymore. He just wanted her gone from our lives. His father visited us in the hospital, bringing a stuffed elephant for the baby. It was the first baby gift he'd ever given, he admitted. He held his granddaughter awkwardly but gently, and I saw something soft in his expression. He told my husband he was proud of him for protecting his family, for breaking the cycle of enabling that had allowed allowed Daniela to become what she was. He offered to help us relocate if we wanted a fresh start somewhere Daniela couldn't find us. The idea of moving became more appealing when we returned home. Even with the nursery repainted and the locks changed again, the house felt tainted. Every room held memories of Chloe's attempted seduction, of Daniela's manipulations, of the weeks of stress that had nearly cost us everything. The pool, once a selling point, now felt like a crime scene. We couldn't look at it without remembering. My husband's work offered him a transfer to their West Coast office. It would mean leaving everything we knew, starting over in a city where no one knew our story. We'd be 3,000 miles from Daniela, from his mother, from the family members who still believed we were the villains. It would also mean leaving the support system we did have. My parents, our real friends, the life we'd built before everything went wrong. We spent long nights discussing it while our daughter slept between us. The case against Daniela was moving forward, but her lawyer had succeeded in painting her as a victim of mental illness exacerbated by family trauma. She'd been released on bail with conditions: no contact with us, mandatory therapy, regular check-ins with a probation officer. But we knew conditions meant nothing to someone who'd spent months plotting our destruction. The decision was made for us when Daniela violated her bail conditions. She didn't contact us directly, but she sent Chloe to do her dirty work. Chloe approached me at the grocery store, my daughter strapped to my chest in a carrier. She said Daniela wanted to apologize, that she was getting help, that she just wanted to see the baby once. When I tried to leave, Chloe grabbed my arm and hissed that I'd destroyed a family, that I'd pay for what I'd done. Another shopper intervened, and Chloe fled, but the damage was done. I sat in my car shaking, holding my daughter close, knowing we'd never be safe as long as we stayed. My husband submitted his transfer request that night. His company expedited it when he explained the situation. Within 2 weeks, they'd arranged for movers, temporary corporate housing, and a position that actually came with a small raise. His father helped us sell the house quickly, taking a loss but gaining freedom. We told only our closest friends and my parents where we were going, swearing them to secrecy. Daniela was arrested again for violating bail after we reported the grocery store incident. This time, the judge revoked bail entirely. She would await trial in custody, her lawyer's protests falling on deaf ears. My husband didn't attend the hearing, but his father did, reporting back that Daniela had screamed and cried, claiming we'd ruined her life. Even facing consequences, she couldn't accept responsibility for her actions. Our last week in town was bittersweet. My parents spent every possible moment with their granddaughter, taking thousands of photos and videos. They understood why we had to leave, but mourned the distance it would put between us. My mother helped me pack the nursery, carefully wrapping each item we'd chosen with such hope before our lives imploded. She promised to visit often, to not let distance diminish her relationship with the baby. My husband met with the prosecutor one final time. They'd offered Daniela a deal: 2 years probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and a permanent restraining order. If she violated any terms, she'd serve 5 years in prison. It wasn't the justice we'd hoped for, but it was something. The prosecutor assured us that with our move and the legal restrictions, Daniela would have a hard time finding us, let alone harassing us. His mother made one last attempt to reconcile. She showed up at our door the night before we left, looking older and smaller than I remembered. She begged my husband to reconsider, claimed Daniela was getting help, that family should forgive. My husband let her see the baby through the window but wouldn't let her inside. He told her that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and protecting his daughter meant keeping her away from anyone who enabled Daniela's behavior. His mother left crying, but for once, her tears didn't move him. We drove away from our house at dawn, the baby sleeping peacefully in her car seat. My husband reached over and took my hand as we passed the city limits. In the rearview mirror, I watched our old life disappear. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also hope. Hope for a life free from manipulation, from toxic family dynamics, from the constant fear of what Daniela might do next. We'd lost a lot: family relationships, our dream home, our sense of security. But we'd gained something too: the knowledge that we could survive anything together, that our love was stronger than anyone's attempts to destroy it. The drive across the country took 5 days. We stopped at random motels, ate at small diners, and slowly felt the weight of the past months lifting. Each mile put more distance between us and the chaos. Our daughter saw her first sunset in New Mexico, her first mountains in Colorado. My husband smiled more in those 5 days than he had in months. By the time we reached the Pacific Ocean, we felt like different people, scarred but healing, wounded but whole. Our new apartment overlooked the Pacific, a cramped 2-bedroom that cost twice what our mortgage had been. My husband set up his home office in the corner of our bedroom, while I arranged the baby's things in the tiny nursery. The building had no pool, just a small courtyard with dying plants. Our daughter didn't care. She was fascinated by the seagulls that landed on our balcony. The first week, we kept checking over our shoulders. Every woman with dark hair made my heart race. My husband installed extra locks and a doorbell camera, even though we were on the 3rd floor. He'd wake up at night to check the windows, then stand over the baby's crib just watching her breathe. I caught him Googling Daniela's name obsessively, looking for any sign she'd been released or had discovered our location. His new coworkers invited us to a weekend barbecue. We almost didn't go, but isolation wasn't healthy either. At the party, someone asked about family visiting. My husband's jaw tightened as he said we weren't close with relatives. The host's wife, Catherine, must have sensed something because she quickly changed the subject. Later, she pulled me aside and mentioned she'd moved here to escape her own toxic family situation. She didn't pry, just handed me her number. 3 weeks into our new life, my husband's phone rang at 2 a.m. His mother's number flashed on the screen. We'd forgotten to block her on his work phone. He let it go to voicemail. Her message was slurred, probably hammered. She rambled about how we'd destroyed Daniela, how she was in jail because of our lies, how we'd stolen her grandchild. She ended by saying she'd hired a private investigator to find us. My husband deleted the message and blocked the number, but sleep didn't come again that night. I started attending a new mother's group at the community center. The other women swapped birth stories and complained about sleepless nights. When they asked about my delivery, I kept it vague, just mentioned it was early due to stress. One mother, Kathy, had also delivered early. Her son was in the NICU for weeks. We bonded over tiny babies who fought their way into the world. She became my first real friend here, someone who didn't know our history. My husband threw himself into work. His new team was launching a major project, and the long hours gave him purpose. He'd come home exhausted, but lighter somehow. His boss was impressed with his dedication, mentioned potential for advancement. For the first time in months, he talked about the future without that haunted look in his eyes. Then Chloe found my Instagram. I'd made it private, but she created a fake account pretending to be someone from my mother's group. The message was short: she's getting out soon. She knows where you are. I showed my husband immediately. He called his father, who confirmed Daniela was still in custody awaiting trial. The message was a lie, but the damage was done. I deleted all social media that night. My parents visited for our daughter's 3-month milestone. They tried to hide their sadness about the distance, focusing instead on how much she'd grown. My mother held her constantly, memorizing every detail. My father helped my husband install better locks, neither of them acknowledging why we needed them. When they left, my mother hugged me tight and whispered that we'd done the right thing. The prosecutor called with an update. Daniela had accepted the plea deal: 2 years probation, mandatory therapy, permanent restraining order. She'd be released in a week. My husband's hand shook as he took notes. The prosecutor reminded us that violating the order meant automatic prison time, that we were protected, but we both knew paper couldn't stop someone determined to hurt us. Catherine invited us to dinner. Her husband Theodore was a lawyer who'd handled his share of family disputes. Without revealing details, my husband asked about restraining order enforcement. Theodore explained the reality: they were only as good as the person's willingness to obey them. He He offered to recommend a colleague who specialized in harassment cases. We declined, not ready to open that door yet. Our daughter started sleeping through the night. Such a small thing, but it felt monumental after everything. My husband would sneak into her room just to watch her sleep peacefully. One night I found him there crying quietly. He said she looked so innocent, so unaware of the chaos that had surrounded her arrival. He promised her again that she'd never experienced that kind of manipulation. His father called with news. Daniela had been released and immediately went to their old house. She'd stood outside screaming for hours until neighbors called police. She was arrested for violating the restraining order. We hadn't even known it extended to the property. This time the judge wasn't lenient. She got 6 months in jail, no plea deals. His father said their mother had collapsed in court, begging them to reconsider. I returned to work part-time, finding a remote position that let me stay home with the baby. My new colleagues didn't know about pools or sisters-in-law or restraining orders. To them, I was just another working mom juggling feeding schedules and video calls. The normalcy felt foreign but welcome. My husband would take the baby during important meetings, bouncing her while he worked at his standing desk. Kathy introduced me to her sister-in-law, who ran a small daycare from her home. We visited to scope it out for when I went full-time. The woman was warm, her home bright and cheerful. No pools, just a small sandbox in the backyard. Our daughter reached for the other babies, already social despite her chaotic start. We put ourselves on the waiting list. My husband's company promoted him to team lead. The position came with a substantial raise and better hours. He accepted immediately, seeing it as another step away from our old life. His new business cards arrived with our updated address. He stared at them for a long time before putting them in his wallet. Such a small thing, but it represented our new beginning. Then his cousin found us, not physically, but through LinkedIn. The message was long, accusatory. He called us cruel, said family should forgive family, that Daniela was suffering in jail because of our vindictiveness. He mentioned that their grandmother was ill, possibly dying, and how could we keep her great-grandchild away during her final days. My husband didn't respond. He screenshotted everything for our records and blocked him. Catherine organized a beach day for several families. We almost said no. Beaches meant swimsuits, and swimsuits brought memories. But our daughter had never seen the ocean up close. She squealed when the waves touched her toes, grabbed handfuls of sand with wonder. Other parents shared snacks and sunscreen. Nobody mentioned pools or asked why I tensed when someone adjusted their bikini strap. 6 months passed. Daniela was released again. This time she didn't come looking for us. His father reported she'd moved in with their mother, was attending therapy, had gotten a job at a retail store. She'd apparently told people she didn't have a brother anymore. The news should have brought relief, but we knew better than to trust her transformations. Our lease came up for renewal. The landlord offered a 2-year term with minimal increase. We signed immediately. This tiny apartment with no pool had become our sanctuary. Our daughter took her first steps in the narrow hallway. She said her first word, bird, on the balcony. Every milestone happened here, untainted by the past. My husband joined a weekend basketball league through work. Physical activity helped with the lingering anxiety. He'd come home sweaty and laughing, telling me about missed shots and friendly trash talk. His teammates didn't know why he sometimes checked his phone obsessively during breaks, or why he always positioned himself to see the gym entrance. One evening while making dinner, my husband's phone buzzed. Unknown number, local area code. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. It was Chloe. She was crying, apologizing, saying she was in therapy now and understood how wrong she'd been. She begged for forgiveness, claimed Daniela had manipulated her too. My husband hung up without responding and immediately called our lawyer. The restraining order was updated to explicitly include Chloe. The lawyer said her contact was technically a violation, but prosecution was unlikely for a single phone call. He advised documenting everything and calling police if she contacted us again. That night, we invested in a better security system. The installation felt like admitting defeat, but our daughter's safety came first. Catherine's son and our daughter became inseparable at playdates. They'd babble at each other in baby language, share toys with the generosity only toddlers possessed. Watching them, I realized our daughter would grow up without cousins, without aunts. The family we'd lost had been replaced by the family we chose. It wasn't traditional, but it was healthier. My husband's nightmares decreased but never fully stopped. He'd wait gasping, reaching for his phone to check the security cameras. I'd hold him until his breathing steadied, reminding him we were safe. 3,000 miles and a restraining order away. Our daughter slept through it all, unaware of her father's fears. We'd preserved her innocence, even if we'd lost ours. His father visited for our daughter's first birthday. He'd aged visibly, the stress of managing Daniela's chaos wearing on him. He brought a small gift and a large check, saying it was for her college fund. Over coffee, he admitted he'd been seeing a therapist to process his role in enabling Daniela. He was learning to set boundaries, even with their mother. Progress came slowly at his age, but it came. The birthday party was small, just Kathy's family, Catherine's, and a few others from our building. No one questioned why no extended family attended. Our daughter smashed her cake with enthusiasm while we sang. My husband took hundreds of photos, creating new memories to overshadow the old. She wouldn't remember this day, but we'd never forget it. Our first celebration without fear. That night, after guests left and the baby slept, we sat on our tiny balcony. The ocean stretched endlessly before us. My husband pulled me close and said we'd made it through the worst. I wanted to believe him. Our daughter was healthy, we had jobs, we'd built a community. But I still flinched when unknown numbers called. Still checked locks twice before bed. Still felt my heart race when I saw women with dark hair at the grocery store. 2 days later, a package arrived with no return address. My husband wouldn't let me open it, calling building security instead. They examined it carefully before revealing the contents. A baby dress, expensive and beautiful, with a note, for my niece, D. Security kept everything as evidence. The police said it didn't violate the restraining order since she hadn't contacted us directly. Technically legal, but emotionally violating. We donated the dress to charity immediately. That weekend, we found a new apartment in a different neighborhood, one with better security and no forwarding address. As we packed, our daughter toddled around, trying to help by putting toys in boxes. She had no idea we were running again. To her, it was an adventure. We signed the lease that afternoon, paying extra for immediate occupancy. Catherine helped us move, asking no questions about the urgency. By Sunday night, we slept in our new home. Our daughter adjusted instantly, fascinated by the different view from her window. My husband and I took longer, checking new locks and testing new cameras. But eventually, exhaustion won. We slept deeply for the first time in days, our daughter safe between us. The sunrise brought another day of building our life away from the chaos. One day at a time, one small victory after another, we moved forward.